You do.
Oh, can I film?
Alright, so next module of the course, hydrogeology. How are the elephants going, right? Yeah, good. It's a little bit different. Okay, what is hydrogeology? Floor's open. What's hydrogeology?
Water geology.
Water and
Study while
rocks.
swimming there, yeah. Any ideas? You must have heard the term before, come on. Is it looking at surface water? No, it's looking at what? Groundwater. There you go, dealing with distribution and movement of water in the crust. It actually technically includes water, I guess, through the whole of the earth, but generally we just apply it to the upper parts of the crust where we can extract the stuff from various uses, so generally just soil and rocks close to the surface. Common applications of it, okay, there are lots of. A lot of people don't really know about because these are things that happen in the background. Extraction of water is probably one of the biggest uses, okay, of the study of hydrogeology, certainly in the way that I'm going to be teaching it to you anyway. Okay, getting water out of the ground for people to drink or use for something, okay, farming, irrigation, whatever, okay. Lots of it happens. It's just like I say, you don't normally see it. You don't build big dams to get the stuff, so there's nothing really visible. Again, you'll see all this later on as I go through the course. It's one of the big uses, one of the big applications anyway. The other one's dewatering. When you dig big holes in the ground for pretty much anything, the railway station down at Britomart and all those other places, foundations for these buildings, often you're below the water table. And the closer you are to sea level, definitely you're going down below the water table. And so dewatering is another thing, okay? And you need to understand how these aquifers and all these things are going to react and how the whole water table and in fact the whole system is going to react before you can start getting into these things, because you have some quite severe consequences of dewatering area. Contamination's a big one, remediation of contaminated sites, okay? Lots of tank farms, for instance, you store petrol, and of course they always leak, always. Petrol station tanks, those things that are buried under the ground where you go and get your car filled up, they always leak, and of course when these places get sold off or they want to do something else with them, they've got to remediate them, okay? And understanding of the groundwater regime, okay, helps you do that. Assessment of extraction effects. You can't just take water out of the ground and have nothing happen, okay? And sometimes the consequences can be quite severe if you're near the coast and you've got a nice freshwater aquifer that you're drawing water from. Eventually the water table aquifer drops, the pressure drops, seawater starts encroaching. Once that happens, it's irreversible. Okay? So again, another use of the study of hydrogeology. And also the quantification and management of the resource itself. Okay? Down in Canterbury, about late 90s, early 2000s, all the beef farmers sold off their land to dairy farmers. And beef farming doesn't use a lot of water. Dairy farming uses crap loads of water. Okay? They just sunk holes into the ground, and they had lots of groundwater down there, and started pumping it willy-nilly, and they've drastically reduced the resource they've got. Lots of people's wells dried up because, of course, as the groundwater table drops, they're not sucking up any water anymore. And there's all sorts of issues down there due to the lack of management of the resource. Okay, so that's really, really important as well. That's just a few of the things. Okay, there's a whole lot of other things that go on with this as well. Water is quite important, I hope, as you realise. See out there, 1 billion people don't have access to safe drinking water in the world. Okay, that's quite a lot of people. Okay, that's quite a lot of people potentially getting sick from drinking icky water. Here's a map of scarcity of water in the world, okay? Both economic scarcity and physical scarcity. It's physically scarce when people wanting it can't get enough. The demand exceeds the amount of water there. Economic scarcity means that there's water, or potentially water, but they don't have the money to get it out. You see lots of news articles of people in Africa and other countries carrying huge pots of water on their head from rivers and things. They've got water, they just can't get it to where they live, and so they need the money. But overall, there is water. Water is a big deal. It's a very scarce commodity. We think we're swimming in this stuff. It always rains in Auckland. We've got lots of water in Auckland. We're lucky. Okay? We have had droughts. We have had water shortages before. Okay, you're going to hear, but you get yourself lucky compared to a lot of people in the world. And of course, this is just going to get worse as the population expands and the water resources are pressured, and we keep destroying them and not managing them properly. Any paper you look at, website, do a website search about water, it's all doom and gloom, and it is actually quite severe. Okay, when the US intelligence services are talking about the dangers of shrinking water resource, you know something's going on. It's on their radar. Okay, they're actually looking into it. California's in the shit big time. Okay, they've been through about third or fourth year major drought that's been going on for almost a decade to some degree. I'll show you some pictures of there in a minute. Okay, they're massive issues. You can see the water issue doesn't just affect directly people taking it. You start having fires, big forest fires, you can't put the things out, so you've got no water. Okay, well, you don't want to waste it doing that. You want to use it for other things. So there's a whole lot of other connected issues that go in with water as well. Throughout the Caribbean, same thing. So bad in some parts of Africa, in Nairobi and Kenya, they're putting up water vending machines so that people can go and buy water, okay, because they A, haven't got access to it, and B, there's not a lot of nice clean stuff. And wars over water. It's one of the next big topics. People think one of the next big wars will actually be fought over water. It has been done in the past to a degree. People also use water as a weapon during these things, during these wars as well. They contaminate wells and water systems so that the people living there can't have access to water, or people fighting can't have access to water. So there's, like I say, a whole other range of things sort of intertwined in with water. It's not just one of those things that we should be sitting taking for granted, even though in New Zealand, for the most part, we're pretty lucky that we do have a lot of the resource. This is one of the water storage lakes in California in 2011 and 2014. Same picture, same place. See how much that's dropped, and it's not filling up. Okay, here's the same thing. Again, they are having major issues with water, huge issues. And they use a lot of it. Remember, it's the most populous state in the States. Very affluent. They use a lot of water, and they're running out. This is a man-made issue, this one here. This is natural, it's a drought, so it's partially their fault for using lots of water, but it's also the weather's fault as well. This here is the Aral Sea in what was Soviet Union. You know, it's divided between Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan. Back in the 60s, the Russians started diverting water from the inland rivers and flying into this to irrigate massive cotton plantations. And you can see what it's done. This is what it looked like in 1977. Massive lake, huge, big thing. Okay? And you see how it's shrunk over the years, and this is what it looked like in 2014. It's really tragic when you see pictures of it, because this is like hundreds of k's across, and you'll see all around the edge here with little villages and their wharves and their boats and everything all high and dry, and they just can't do anything. They've lost their livelihood. It used to be a thriving fishing industry, and all sorts of other things associated with it as well. It's a man-made disaster to do with water, not a natural one. Okay? It could have been averted. If they destroyed all the dams feeding into the sea, it might actually regenerate to some degree as well. Okay, so I'm going to be talking about hydrogeology, but the overall study of groundwater science is quite a complex one. It involves a lot of different disciplines. Okay, a heck of a lot of different disciplines, in fact. Of course, that one, which we don't have to talk about. The good thing about teaching you guys this stuff is I don't have to talk about the geology. You know what sedimentary igneous rocks are, and you know what folds and faults and all that kind of stuff. I hope you do anyway. Is a little bit of geophysics we'll touch on, and the hydrology, which is the stuff we'll be doing today. Okay, how the water flows and how it's stored and how it's released and everything to and from aquifers. But a whole lot of other things that you might not have considered go into it as well. Chemistry, really important. Water chemistry, I'll be talking about that in a couple of lectures' time. Okay? You need to make sure your water's drinkable. There are lots of things that can occur in groundwater that don't make it not necessarily not drinkable, but not suitable for purposes. Okay? Some industries need very pure water, devoid of certain ions, and some say you can't use some groundwater. Of course, climatology. Okay? You need to recharge aquifers, so you need an understanding of climate. Soil physics and soil science. Okay? This water gets to aquifers by percolating through the ground, and also flows upwards and downwards within the ground as the water table rises and lowers depending on what's going on with the aquifers. So it's important. Ecology, to some degree, whether what you're going to do is going to have an effect on anything. Okay, and just because you're taking it from under the ground doesn't mean it's not affecting the surface. This gets really complicated. We don't worry about that too much, but that's where all the formulas that will be going on in this lecture, further lectures come from. Fluid mechanics, isotope analysis, okay, tracing water flows through the ground, tracing speeds of water. Engineering, okay, water, groundwater and slopes, retaining walls, all sorts of other building issues. GIS, spatial analysis, and modelling, okay, working out theoretically, with inputs that you gain from stuff I'll talk about later, okay, making theoretical models and working out the impact of doing certain things to the groundwater system, how long it takes, whether it's a wise idea to do those in the first place, okay, whether it's sustainable. So a whole lot of things go into it. Obviously, touching on this lot up here, maybe if I get time, these lectures take a while, we'll talk a bit about the modelling. Chemistry will come into it a little wee bit there as well, just to give you an idea of the kind of things that are good and bad about groundwater. A lot of books, which are really useful to consult. Most of those we've got them at the university on the KU short loan part of the library. This one here is probably the Groundwater Bible. This one by Driscoll, okay, it's 86 one. It's a big fat green thing, costs about $1,000, but it's a really, really good book. This isn't too bad. This one here is another one of the Groundwater Bibles, okay. But these are all really, really good books, so if you're looking for an extra bit of information just to clarify some of the stuff that I'm talking about, you can find it in these. Unfortunately, there isn't one book that puts all of the stuff together in one place. You have to sort of pick through them. But if you're keen enough, you might want to do that. There's a few extras there as well. So you can see there's quite a lot of literature being done on these things, but some really, really good books are in that list. In fact, those are all pretty good. There's no crap ones here at all. Okay, get started. Aquifers. You can see a big list of topics to be introduced in the lecture on aquifers. Hopefully today I'll get you out of here. Hopefully, we'll see how it goes. So I won't read through all those because you'll encounter them as we go, but they're all really important aspects of groundwater, okay? All either properties of aquifers, storage properties or flow properties, things that need to be understood and things that you actually quantify when you're studying this things through various techniques, which we'll talk about through the course as well. Okay, what's an aquifer? Another question for you. Must have encountered the word. Must have something to do with water, eh? What do you think an aquifer is? Any idea?
Groundwater source.
Yep, source of groundwater. Yep, near enough. It's a body of rock or whatever that holds water. Okay, saturated bed formation, drift formations, yielding water in economically useful quantities. Technically, for what we're talking about, you know, we want aquifers you can get water out of to use that will be sustainable. Okay. Technically, I guess any body of rock holding water is an aquifer, but not for the purposes of hydrogeologists. So it must contain pore spaces or open spaces, not necessarily pores, but certainly got to be porous. Okay, so it must have porosity to hold the water. To be useful, they must be interconnected. Okay, so it must have permeability. The porosity and permeability, the more the better, because the more water it holds, the easier that water will transmit through the aquifer. Okay. So they must be sufficiently large enough to be transmitted to wells at a sufficient rate. Some aquifers are better than others for this. It depends how much water you want as to how useful they are. Several types of aquifers you encounter, okay, in these studies. Unconfined aquifers, okay, they basically sit in the ground. The water table is exposed to the atmosphere and it can rise and fall, okay, as water percolates to or is extracted from the aquifer. Opposite of unconfined, confined. Here, the aquifer itself is isolated between impermeable layers. Okay, the water is under some pressure, and so the water table, its theoretical water table, rises up above the aquifer itself. So it's subject to higher pressures than atmospheric pressure. Okay, the water table or the piezometric surface in these is not open to the atmosphere for the most part. Aquitards, aquicludes, okay, layers that stop water getting into an aquitard will retard the flow of water, so water can flow through it very slowly, but it can still get through. An aquiclude will exclude the water completely. Most confining layers are aquitards. It's very rare to have an aquiclude. Semi-confined, the same as confined, except here you've got some leakage into and or out of the aquifer through those near impermeable layers through the aquitards. Okay, but otherwise they're pretty much the same as confined aquifers. And perched ones, don't have to deal with these very much, but they do exist. Something to be aware of, and something you don't really want to encounter, because these are discontinuous in both space and time. Okay, and saturated conditions. These are saturated conditions that exist within the unsaturated zone. Okay, they're very limited in extent, and they're very easy to drain. Okay, water table. I won't read through all these. These are things you can read through yourself, because they'll become self-explanatory as I show you some of the diagrams. Anyway, water table, well, and talk about those. This is important, the piezometric surface. It's a hypothetical surface of pressure, hydraulic head through an aquifer, okay, throughout all of it, or part of, of a confined aquifer, okay, it only applies to confined aquifers. And I'll show you a picture of what this means in a minute. But essentially, it's analogous to the water table of an unconfined aquifer, but it has different properties and it's caused by different phenomena. Piezometer is just a tube that's stuck in the ground that you can take water measurements from, artesian well. And flowing artesian wells are where the water level inside the well is higher than the groundwater table. And if you're stuck with jargon and things, it's an online dictionary, and there's also a book which is pretty easily accessible online as a PDF if you know how to do searches. Some of those books in that list I said before as well, you can get online if you know where to look. I'm not going to tell you where to look because it's not completely illegal. It's not completely legal, but you can get most of those as scans online if you are cunning enough to search them out. It's easy enough to do. If I can do it, you guys should be able to. Okay, unconfined aquifers, water table exposed to the atmosphere, free to rise and fall, okay, under its own steam. So you have a system like this, kind of like say basement. This is the unsaturated ground, or rain recharge, and water falls, percolates down, and you've got some sort of bounding surface down here, an aquitard, an aquiclude, something of low permeability that stops the water percolating down any deeper at any great rate of knots. And you can see as the water falls in there, this surface will be able to rise, and as it flows away or you pump it out, the surface will fall. So that's the water table, but it's open to the atmosphere. It's not under any pressure, it's only under atmospheric pressure. Okay, so that's an unconfined aquifer. Pretty simple thing. If you put a well into it, the water level within the well will rise up to approximately the level of the water table. Okay, there'll be exceptions to that, which we'll talk about later. But essentially, a water table well, the water table will be way down there where the water table is. Okay, so little yellow triangles or white triangles that pop up on these diagrams will tell you where the water table is in varying systems. So that's a simple one. Confined aquifer. It's a little bit more complicated. Isolated from the atmosphere for the most part, not all through because they do get recharged, they must be open in some areas, but most of the time they're going to be isolated from the atmosphere, and because of that, the way they work, right, they will be subject to higher than atmospheric pressure. So here's a confined aquifer system, here's our confined one down here, an aquiclude here, here's our basement or another aquiclude. Jammed in between that is this porous layer here, and water has been able to keep into that. You can see this part of the aquifer is open to the atmosphere, okay, it's a water table. Right. Down here isn't. You can see all this water up here is pushing down all this water down here, okay, high head, low head, so causing pressure on here. So if you sunk a well into that aquifer, okay, and screened it just within the aquifer, and saw what would happen, it would come up to this theoretical surface here. This is the piezometric surface. This is essentially the water table of here. Okay, so it's analogous to this, except it's for the confined aquifer, not the unconfined aquifer. Okay, what it means is the water under here is trying to reach this level. So if you chucked a well in there, screened it just within this here and sealed it off through the aquitard, the water in the well would rise up to this level up here. Okay, you'd have an artesian well. A lot of people call wells that flow at the surface an artesian well. It's not. An artesian well has a water level that's above the groundwater level, right? It doesn't have to be flowing at the surface. Put one here, then you'll have a flowing artesian well. Okay, see the water level's trying to reach this here, so it'll pour out of the ground until you plug that hole up, or until the water table drops way down below the top of the well. Okay, so it's confined aquifers, a little bit different. Okay, they're a little bit more tricky, but they're really, really good and really useful. We'll talk about a lot about confined aquifers later. Semi-confined, same sort of thing, except here you've got leakage from below or above or both. Okay, slightly slow leakage, not bucketing in and out, but you do have water being able to transfer itself either from other water sources to the aquifer or from the aquifer to those other water sources. Okay, it can drain and fill, it can go both ways. But the same applies here. It's got the same piezometric surface as the previous, and if you put those wells into it, they will do the same things. Okay, so they generally behave the same way. I'll briefly talk about those maybe when we're talking about the pumping wells later on. What time we get. And the perched aquifer, water table here, discontinuous. Okay, it's very isolated little stuff. It's open to the atmosphere, so it's free to rise and fall, the same as the unconfined ones, as it receives or gets water taken out of it. Yeah, same system here. Got maybe an old buried riverbed or an old lake bed or something, okay, that's been buried as stuff on top of it has been accumulating. So it's now forming this little wee aquitard, which is able to hold yeah, so it's able to hold water, but you can see the amount of water it can hold is very small. Okay, and if you're going to pump that out, you're going to get rid of it pretty quickly. If you put a well into it, the water level in the well will rise up to the water level of the perched aquifer. Now, you don't normally find all these things in isolation. In fact, often you'll be dealing with all of these things at once over a reasonably small to large area. And that's very uncommon for you to just find a confined aquifer without having to go through things when you have to go through things. And on top of it, there'll be unconfined aquifers as well. That's why it's really important when you construct wells to seal them off really nicely. I'll talk about that in a future lecture too. But you see, the whole system works nicely together, and it's a simplified version, but that's generally what you find in the real world. Unconfined aquifers, under-confined aquifers. You may or may not see these things, but you'll be dealing with water tables, you'll be dealing with piezometric surfaces as well. The deeper you go, the more things change. When you're drilling, we'll talk about later, you've got to keep a careful watch on A, what you're taking out of the ground, but B, also the things that are happening with the water in the ground as well. Okay, any aquifer has a set of properties which can be defined, a set of numerical values which tell us something about it. Okay, they define how the groundwater in aquifers responds over time. They'll tell us what the aquifer will do if you start pumping it. Okay, and all sorts of other useful things about it. And these are things that you can actually quantify through various methods. And we'll talk about the quantification of them later. I'm just going to tell you what they are. So there's two categories of aquifer properties. There are storage properties and there are flow properties. Okay? So the storage properties dictate how aquifers store and release water. When I talk about releasing water, I mean when we disturb them, single well into them and start taking water out. Okay? They'll release water in different ways depending whether they're confined or unconfined, depending how porous they are, depending whether they've got primary or secondary porosity, etc., etc. There's a series of those there, which we'll go through today. And the second category are flow properties, okay, dictating how the water actually moves through aquifers, okay. Naturally, because the water doesn't naturally move through these things very slowly, but more importantly for us, how the aquifer behaves when you start pulling water out at an unnatural rate, okay, at a great rate. What happens around the well, further out from the well, what effect this has on the aquifer. And we'll start hopefully dealing with those ones on, when's the next lecture? Tomorrow? Wednesday? Wednesday. And of course all these things are controlled by the nature of the aquifer, the rock type, whether it's stratified, what structures are there, okay, whether it's primary, secondary, porosity, a whole range of things, but the determination is necessary for the assessment and usefulness of an aquifer, and that's why we'll be going into this when we talk about next week when we start talking about going through a project, how to extract groundwater from the ground. And as you are going through and assessing a groundwater situation, you are determining all of these things here, because they will tell you whether it's a good or bad aquifer, how much you can stress it. Those will be the inputs you put into your model at the end, because you want to know over how many years you can pump this thing at a certain rate and what it's going to do and how it's going to behave and what it's going to affect and all those kind of things. So quantifying all these is really important if you're developing, if you're sensibly developing a resource you want to last for a long time. So I'll put it that way, because sometimes many people don't do that. So start with porosity, it's the easiest one. You all have an idea what porosity is anyway. Okay, here it's going to call it N times N, okay, so it's simply the ratio of the volume of pore space to the total volume of the aquifer. Irrelevant of whether the voids are connected or not, this is not permeability, this is simply just the void space in the rock, okay, and it's expressed as a decimal. Of course, obviously, the larger the void space, the larger the pore space, the more void, the greater the porosity, then technically the better the aquifer should be. It should have a lot more water in it, okay, that water should be much easier to get out of the aquifer as well for a variety of reasons. It does provide an indication of the volume, so it's really important to understand or to know the porosity. Okay? It's generally the easiest thing to get. Okay? Different materials over time have been assessed, and you usually get tables of approximate porosities of various rock types depending on their properties. It doesn't equate the amount of water that you can get out of it. Okay? When you start stressing the aquifer, it doesn't tell you that.